I'm only human and I make mistakes. But today, I'm going to show you how we can recover from them. Hi, and welcome to Quilt Meets World, where we have adventures in piecing and joy. I'm Russ. Come on into my sewing room. A few weeks ago, I created this gnome, and I was all proud and excited about it until I took a picture and realized that this cheek is on wrong. It took, you know, I looked at it several times. I was so proud of it. I was showing it off. And then I took a picture for my weekly vlog. And as I was putting it in the video, I said, oops, there's a problem. And it just, one, goes to show I'm human. And two, it made me question, do I want to fix this or do I want to leave it as it is? And I thought this would be an excellent opportunity to share with everybody how to fix if you put something in wrong. Now, I'm going to tell you there's a lot of factors that decide whether I'm going to fix it. And the main factor is where it is in the quilt and how far along I am in the process. Because of the way that the quilt is designed here and where it is, this is an easy process. So I have no qualms taking a handful of stitches out and resewing them. If I already had borders on and everything else, that's a lot more work. Donna Jordan of Jordan Fabrics has a wonderful video actually on how to recover if it's even already quilted. Um, I've actually ended up gifting quilts that I ended up finding out after the fact that one of the blocks has one section sewn backwards. And I was like, well, it's too late now just because of how far it was. This, because it's done in rows, all I have to do is, let's see if I could show it here. All I'm going to have to do is seam rip about from here through, seam rip from about here through, and then when I have that done, I can seam rip this down, and then I can have this whole section here apart, pull it apart, fix it, and then sew it back in. So that's what I'm going to show right now. So like I said, the first thing I'm going to do is do some seam ripping. And make sure you're seam ripping what you need to rip, not another row. I mean, you can just sew it back, but it's not a big. And what I will do is I will go a little bit past the seam that I need to finish seam ripping. So, like in this case, I'm in the second block or in the third block, and I'm trying to get these ripped. And I know this isn't the most efficient way to seam rip, but I'm being a little cautious because I don't want to have to do a lot more repair to this than I need to. Okay, so we have our piece ripped out. I'm gonna have to clear up all these extra threads before we finish. But here is the piece that came out, and I still have to take the last piece apart. There's threads all over the place because, seam ripping is so much fun. Like I said, I know that there's a little bit easier way to do some of this, but I've had a bit of caffeine, so I'm trying to keep my attempts at ripping things at a minimum. And this goes back to, the bigger your stitch length, the easier it is to rip, but also the bigger your stitch length, it'll sometimes show in the finished product. Have this, usually I can pull the last couple stitches, and it doesn't want to, so I'll just pop them. And apparently I'm being told I'm being notified of something. There we go. So now the important thing is making sure that we get it put back in the correct location. I'm also prepping my iron. So it goes like that and like that. Once my iron finishes heating up, we will get the iron, these pieces back flat, because it's easier to sew on a flat surface than a already pressed surface. And as you see here, we have our pieces fitting nicely. They've been pressed, so they're practically like new. I'm going to take these two pieces and stitch them back together in the correct orientation. And before I put it back in, I am going to triple check to make sure everything is still in the orientation that I expect. And that looks good. The next thing I need to do is sew it back to the row. And this is going to take a little bit of finagling, and that's why we removed a couple extra stitches up here so that we had that little bit of room to finagle. And I'm just trying to get it lined up perfect. And move the whole thing to my machine. And just take it slow. And there's a little bit of bulk here, so it doesn't want to move. So now we have our row back together. I should have pressed these while I was at it earlier, so let me flatten these out real quick. And now that we have everything pressed, we can start putting it back together. It does not matter which row you start with, but you're going to start in the center where it's already stitched and stitch your way outward. So I will start on this row because it's going to be easier to finagle under the machine. I do not need a leader for this, and I am going to start even further back because I want to make sure I catch where we still have a couple stitches running in order to ensure that we don't have a risk of it coming apart. And because everything is pressed in opposite directions, it's very easy to line our intersections up. I'm still going to go off onto a ender because that helps keep the stitches just a little bit tighter. And then find the other row that has to be stitched up. Again, we're lining them up. A little bit of a mess, but once it gets pressed and everything, nobody will notice. And off onto the ender. And with that, other camera, he looks perfect. So it does not take a lot of effort to fix a mistake in a quilt generally. It all depends on, how the rows are put together, how the columns are put together, and how far in the mistake is, and also how important it is to make the mistake. You can make those decisions. It's like I said, showed you, it's not a lot of effort. You're shoveling around a bit of a block. It's a lot easier to fix it when it's still in block form versus when it's in quilt form, just because of the amount that you are, I'm sorry, full quilt top form, just because of the amount of fabric that you would have rolling around everything. So I hope this gives you a awesome idea on if you ever make a mistake. We're all human. It's not a big deal. It's just a little bit of thread that you have to clip and put back together. It's not scary. So if you do make a mistake, don't fear it. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, stay happy and keep stitching.